Let it be known, inscribed upon the hearts of the faithful, as it is upon the adamantite gates of the Sanctum Imperialis, there is no failure but sin. There is no redemption but through penance. And in the 41st millennium, there is no penance save that which is paid in blood and fire and agony. From the Scriptus Munistorum, Volume 9, verse Y, a soul untempered is a soul undone. In the grim darkness of this age, this is not a suggestion. It is a law as immutable as gravity, as unforgiving as the vacuum. The Imperium of man is a bastion besieged, a flickering candle in an ocean of cosmic night, and the wax that feeds this flame is the faith of its quadrillions of subjects. Faith, not hope, not kindness, not reason. These are luxuries, the vices of a weaker, forgotten age. There is only faith and its physical expression, duty. To the God-Emperor, all is owed. To his servants, all is demanded. The ecclesiarchy, the holy ministorum, exists for a singular purpose, to channel this faith, to forge it from a fragile belief into an unbending weapon. And like any weapon, it must be maintained. It must be scoured of rust. Failure is rust. Hesitation is rust. Compassion when duty demands brutality is the most insidious rust of all. It is a flaw in the steel. It is a crack in the fortress wall. It is a sin. Not a simple mistake. Not a lapse in judgment. A sin. A spiritual stain that not only damns the individual, but provides a purchase for the archenemy. A single moment of weakness can unravel a crusade. A single act of misplaced mercy can doom a world. The Ministorum knows this. It has seen it happen 1,000 times over on 1,000 worlds. Therefore, the calculus of the Imperial Creed is simple, brutal, and absolute. Sin must be expunged. Not forgiven for forgiveness implies a weakness in the divine law. Not forgotten for to forget is to invite its return. It must be expunged, scoured, burned away until only the pure, terrified, obedient soul remains. And the only solvent for such a stain, the only fire hot enough to purify such deep-seated corruption, is pain. Pain is the Emperor's truth. It is the universe's final, honest statement. All else is illusion, comfort, safety, love. These are lies the flesh tells the mind. Pain is the voice of the soul screaming for its creator. The confessors of the Adepta Sororitas understand this better than any. They are the guardians of the sisters' souls, and they wield pain as a master artist wields a brush, a lash for a wayward thought, a fast for a moment of pride, a prayer scourge for a flicker of doubt. This is their love. This is their ministry. To hone their charges into perfect, flawless instruments of the Emperor's will, and to shatter those who refuse to be sharpened. But what of the instrument that does not merely dull, but breaks? What of the battle sister, a beacon of faith who shatters her vows so completely that she cannot be merely re-honed? For the common soldier, the guardsman failure is met with a commissar's bolt. Simple, efficient. For the citizen, heresy is met with the pyre, a public cleansing spectacle. But for the Adepta Sororitas, for one of the Emperor's own daughters, such an end is insufficient. It is too easy. Her sin is greater, for she was given so much more. She was given faith, and she betrayed it. She was given power, and she misused it. Her fall is not a stumble. It is a plummet from a holy spire. Her path to damnation or redemption begins with the first title of her disgrace, Sister Repentia. She is stripped of her blessed power armor, the sacred icon of her station. Her head is shorn, her purity seals burned before her eyes. She is clad in the black rags of the penitent, her sins inscribed upon parchment and nailed to her very flesh. She is cast from her order. She is no longer a sister of the Eben Chalice or the valorous heart. She is nobody, a ghost haunting the margins of the crusade. Yet she is given one final terrible gift, the Eviscerator. A two-handed chainsword of monstrous proportions, its roaring teeth a promise of the only absolution she can now hope for. These Repentia are formed into squadrons and unleashed at the very apex of the battle, a wave of screaming, unarmored flesh aimed at the heart of the enemy. Their mistress of repentance drives them forward with neural whips and litanies of shame. They are not expected to survive. They are not meant to survive. Their death is their only prayer. In the moment their eviscerator cleaves a Chaos Marine or a great Orc war boss in that singular suicidal instant of violence, they might find forgiveness, their debt paid in blood. But the creed is vast, and its catalogue of sins is endless. There are failures, and there are failures. There are sins of the hand, a missed shot, a faltered charge. And there are sins of the soul, a conscious choice to defy dogma, a decision to place the material above the divine. What of the sister who saves 1,000 citizens but allows a single sacred relic to be lost? The citizens are mortal, their lives a fleeting vapor. The relic is eternal. It is a piece of the Emperor's glory. To make that choice is not weakness. It is blasphemy. It is an act of profound, arrogant heresy. For such a soul, the glorious, messy death of a Repentia is a mercy she has not earned. Her penance cannot be swift. It cannot be a single bloody moment. Her sin was of the mind, and so the mind must be unmade. Her penance must be a symphony of suffering, a prolonged, meticulous, and agonizing deconstruction of her very being. She must become a lesson. She must be made an icon of suffering. For this, the ultimate penance, the ecclesiarchy, and the Adeptus Mechanicus, in a rare and terrifying union of purpose, created the engine. The penitent engine. It is known by many names in the dark cloisters. The Walker of Shame, the Throne of Agony, the Mobile Cathedral of the Damned. It waits in the deepest sanctums of the convent, often in its own chapel of thorns, attended not by sisters, but by grim, oil-stained servitors and whispering tech priests. It is a colossus of iron and rage. It towers a 20-foot effigy of metal, all pistons, cables, and brutalist angles. It is a machine built from the nightmares of a mad artist given form by the dogma of a cruel god. Its form is a mockery of the human. A thick, armored torso, housing a roaring, fume-belching reactor, stands atop two powerful reverse-jointed legs. Its feet are not feet, but heavy spiked platforms designed to stamp and crush to shake the very ground with their tread. This is not a product of the sleek STC templates. It is a relic cobbled and recobbled over millennia. Its chassis is a patchwork of mismatched plates, some bearing the Aquila, others the cog symbol of Mars, all of it pockmarked by battle and stained with soot. Chains as thick as a man's arm drape from its structure, clinking with a hollow, funereal sound. Votive shrines, tiny alcoves containing the finger bones of martyred pilots, are welded to its shoulders. And the parchment, so much parchment, litanies of repentance, confessions of the damned decrees of judgment, all are nailed, bolted, or glued to every available surface, fluttering like a grotesque plumage as the machine moves. But the true horror, the machine's true purpose, is not the chassis. It is the cockpit. There is no armored cradle. There is no blast shield. There is no escape pod. At the very front of the machine, exposed to the enemy, to the wind, to the rain, is a great iron cross. This is the pilot's seat. The sinner is not placed within the machine. She is mounted upon it. She becomes its figurehead, a living, screaming saint of agony. Her limbs will be shackled, her body exposed, clad only in the black rags of her sin. She is a sacrifice offered up to the battlefield. And the arms. By the Emperor, the arms. They are not extensions of the machine. They are replacements for the pilot's own. From the main chassis, two massive articulated limbs jut forth, ending in the instruments of her absolution. On one side, a pair of gigantic, counter-rotating buzz saws, their adamantium teeth screaming for blood. On the other, a set of heavy flamers, their maws promising the cleansing fire of the Emperor's wrath. These are not weapons she controls. These are weapons she becomes. They are wired directly to her will, or what is left of it. The Penitent engine is a theological statement. It is the Ministerum's argument against heresy written in 30-foot-tall letters of fire and steel. It is a walking paradox. It is the ultimate expression of the Imperium's cruelty and the ultimate expression of its capacity for redemption. For the sinner, the pilot, the penitent, her journey is one of deconstruction. She is not a pilot. She is biocomponent 774. She is brought to the machine, not with reverence, but with the cold, detached efficiency of a tech priest. She will be stripped, anointed with oils of agony, and hard-wired into the throne. Great neural plugs will be hammered into the base of her skull. Chemical conduits will be jammed into her arteries, not to deliver painkillers, but to pump a constant boiling flood of combat stims, pain agonists, and rage inducers. Her senses will be hijacked. She will not see with her eyes. She will see through the machine's weeping, red-lensed optics. She will not hear with her ears. She will hear the binary cant of the machine spirit, a low, constant, angry growl in her mind. Her pain will be her universe. Every bullet that strikes the hull will be a fresh, white-hot agony delivered to her nervous system. Every step the machine takes will feel like her bones are being ground to dust. And her screams will be harvested. A voxcaster mounted in the machine's throat will amplify her unceasing shriek of torment, filtering it, blending it with hymns of hate, and broadcasting it across the battlefield. Her agony becomes a war hymn. Her terror becomes a weapon of fear. She, in her deepest, most profound disgrace, becomes a tool. This is her service. This is her penance. She will be unleashed, a mindless, roaring beast of pain and faith pointed at the enemy and forbidden to stop. She will kill until she is killed. She will burn until she is burned. And in the final blinding moment when a Lehman Russ shell finally finds her, or a tyrannid biomonster tears her from the throne, in that microsecond of oblivion, her soul, scoured clean by an ocean of suffering, will be judged. And the ecclesiarchy, in its infinite, terrible wisdom, will declare her redeemed. The machine will be salvaged. The parts will be reclaimed. The throne will be scrubbed of her blood. And in the dark cloisters, another sister, broken and shamed, will be brought forth to begin the journey. The hymn of steel and sin is eternal, and it must always be sung. The air was a solid, screaming thing. It was made of pulverized plasteel promethium smoke and the unending guttural roars of traitors. Sister Arabelle's bolt gun kicked against her shoulder pauldron, a steady hammering rhythm that was her only prayer in the din. Thump, thump, thump. With every shell, a heretic clad in rusted crimson and marked with the 8-pointed star was pulped. An eternity of damnation in every shot. She was a battle sister of the Order of our Martyred Lady, and she stood on the broken spine of the Basilica Secundus on the world of Lyra Prime. Below her, the last bastion of Imperial defenders held a kilometer-wide plaza, the only thing standing between the forces of the Word-bearers and the planet's primary spaceport. Sister Sergeant, a vox crackle from her left. Sister Ishani, her faceplate cracked, revealing one wide, terrified eye. They're bringing up a defiler Sector Gamma. Hold your ground, Sister Arabelle, shouted back, her voice amplified by her helm's vox. Trust in your armor. Trust in his fire. She swung her bolter, firing a controlled burst that tore the arm from a cultist champion wielding a buzzing chain axe. He protects, but he was demanding a high price. The line was failing. For every traitor they cut down, 3 more seemed to rise from the rubble, their voices chanting a blasphemy that made her teeth ache. Her squad, the Emperor's Scythes, was down to 6. They were tasked with the holiest of duties, defending the ruined archway that led to the reliquary of St. Celestine's Tear. Within that shattered room, raised high on a splintered marble plinth, hung the Vexillum Dominus, the personal banner of the long-dead Canoness Praxedes, said to be woven from her own hair and dipped in the blood of the first demon she slew. It was an icon of such profound sanctity that its very presence held the warp at bay. It was the anchor of their faith. A new transmission, this one weaker, almost drowned by static, bled into her private command channel. It wasn't from the Sororitas command. It was from a civilian frequency, one she was supposed to be monitoring, but not prioritizing. Crying, "Oh Emperor, they found us, trapped in the Undercroft. Sub-level 4 Manufactorum. They're burning the doors. Ave Imperator, someone." The voice was a man's, choked with terror before it dissolved into a wet gurgle and a scream. Arabelle froze. The Manufactorum. That was 500 meters behind her position. The official evacuation orders had declared it clear. A lie. A lie to maintain morale. And now the traitors' flanking forces, having broken through the outer perimeter, had found them. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, trapped. A second transmission, sharp and cold as ice, overrode the first. It was Canoness Lyra, her voice cutting through the battle's roar with absolute authority. "Sister Arabelle, the line at the plaza is buckling. Your squad is to hold the reliquary archway. The Vexillum must not fall. It is the Emperor's will, no matter the cost. Acknowledge." Arabelle looked forward, towards the plaza where the main force of word-bearers was advancing. Her path, her duty. She looked back over her shoulder towards the smoke-belching Manufactorum, towards the screams. The dogma was clear. Lives were the Emperor's currency, to be spent as he willed. A single citizen was a flicker. The Vexillum was eternal. It was a fragment of the Emperor's divine glory. To lose it was unthinkable. It was a spiritual catastrophe. Sister Ishani screamed, pulling her back. The Defiler had rounded the corner, its crab-like legs clambering over a mountain of corpses. Its battle cannon swiveled, aiming directly at their archway. "Acknowledge, Sister Sergeant Canoness." Lyra's voice was sharp, impatient. Arabelle saw the choice. A junction of two hells. Protect the banner and listen to 1,000 souls be dragged into madness. Save the souls and betray a holy icon. The Defiler fired. The shell hit the archway above them, showering them in blessed marble. The Vexillum whipped in the blast wave but held. The screams from the Manufactorum reached a new, fevered pitch. "The Emperor protects," Arabelle whispered the words, tasting like ash. "But we are his shield." It was a thought, a simple, terrible thought, and it was heresy. The dogma was clear. The relic was the shield. It protected them. Arabelle looked at the Defiler. She looked at the Manufactorum. She made her choice. "Scythes!" she roared, her voice a clarion of sudden, terrible purpose. "On me, we are leaving the post to the Manufactorum. We will be the shield." The shock on her sisters' faces was palpable, even through their helmets. But Sister Sergeant," Ishani stammered. "The Canoness, the Vexillum, the Canoness is not here," Arabelle snapped, grabbing a crack grenade from her belt. "The people are. Now move for the Emperor and for the innocent." She threw the grenade, staggering the Defiler, and broke from the cover of the archway, running away from the primary threat, away from her holy charge. Her squad, their faith in her overriding their confusion, followed. They plunged into a side street, a river of bolter fire and damnation carving a desperate path. They reached the Manufactorum's Undercroft entrance just as the heavy plasteel doors buckled, melted slag pouring from their edges. Arabelle shoulder-charged the weakened barrier, her power armor screaming in protest, and burst through. The room was a slaughterhouse. Cultists were dragging men and women from hiding, their mockery echoing in the vast chamber. "Purge the unclean." Arabelle bellowed, her squad opening fire. The battle was short, brutal, and intimate. It was a massacre. The scythes were avenging angels, their bolters and chains wards reaping a terrible toll on the lightly armed heretics. Arabelle found the civilian leader, the man whose voice she'd heard dying against a nutrient vat. "The tunnels," he gasped, pointing. "The old aqueduct. Clear. To the... Get them moving." Arabelle ordered Ishani, "Form a rear guard." A tide of weeping, terrified, grateful humanity. Men, women, children, robed Manufactorum workers poured from their hiding places, and fled into the aqueduct Arabelle's squad had cleared. Arabelle stood at the tunnel mouth, her bolter, hot firing at the traitor reinforcements now flooding the chamber. The last child, a small girl clutching a scorched Imperial aquila, ran past her. The child paused, looked up at Arabelle's blood-splattered helmet and whispered, "Thank you." A strange, warm feeling filled Arabelle's chest. Pride, a feeling she had not been trained to recognize. Then a sound shook the world. It was not the roar of the defiler. It was a deeper, spiritual crack, a shockwave of pure malice that vibrated in her bones. She turned, looking back towards the Basilica Secundus. A column of obscene pink and black fire had erupted from the reliquary, climbing into the toxic sky. The Vexillum Dominus was gone. The traitors, finding the archway undefended, had stormed. It captured the banner and defiled it on the spot, using it as a focus for a dark ritual. The very air around the basilica now seemed to curdle. Arabelle's squad fell silent. The vox was dead, save for a low, weeping static. Then a single click. A new voice, this one cold, precise, and amplified by proximity. "Sister Arabelle." Arabelle turned. Standing on the gantry above the Manufactorum entrance, flanked by her Celestian guard, was Canoness Lyra. Her face was bare, a mask of carved, righteous fury. She had seen it all. The abandonment of the post, the saving of the civilians, the loss of the relic. "You saved the flesh." The Canoness said, her voice dangerously soft. The roar of the distant battle seemed to fade, replaced by the pounding in Arabelle's ears. Arabelle looked at the empty tunnel where the civilians had fled. She looked at the defiled column of smoke that had been a holy site. They were... Arabelle began, her voice hoarse. "They were chattel," Lyra stated. It was not an insult. It was a fact. The Emperor's property. Replaceable. The Vexillum was his word. It was our faith made manifest. And you, in your arrogance, in your compassion, you traded eternity for chaff. The Canoness pointed a single gauntleted finger at Arabelle. "Your sin is not cowardice, sister. It is far worse. It is the heresy of the self. You placed your judgment above your oath. You placed the mortal above the divine." Arabelle opened her mouth. No words came. She had saved 1,000 lives, and in doing so she had damned her own soul. The stone was cold. It bit through the thin canvas shift that was now her only garment, seeping a paralytic chill into her knees. Arabelle knelt. She had been kneeling for 8 hours. Her power armor, the blessed suit of adamantium that had been her skin for decades, was gone. Her bolter, her chainsword, her rosarius, all taken. She was naked before her accusers, and the emptiness where her war gear had been was a cold, hollow ache, a phantom limb of faith. The hall was a void. It was the chamber of solemn adjudication, a cavernous space within the convent fortress built from black basalt that seemed to drink the light. The only illumination came from a single vast stained glass window behind the dais, depicting the Emperor casting the arch-enemy from the golden light of terror. The light it cast was blood red, and accusing, painting the judges in shadow. There were 5 of them seated at a high, unadorned stone table. 4 canonesses from different orders, their faces impassive, stern masks of duty. They were the jury. And in the center, seated on a throne-like chair of iron, was Confessor Malachi. He was an ancient man, his body a withered husk, kept alive by a web of humming rebreathers and arcane life support systems. Only his eyes burned with a terrible, undimmed fire. He was the voice of the creed. He was her judge. Arabelle's squad, the Scythes, were gone, taken to other chambers for interrogation for reconsecration. She was alone. The silence in the chamber was absolute, broken only by the distant rhythmic thud of the fortress's defense batteries, a reminder of the war that raged on, indifferent to her fate. Finally, Confessor Malachi spoke. His voice was not a human sound. It was a dry, synthesized rasp, amplified by a vox grill embedded in his throat. Arabelle, formerly of the Order of our Martyred Lady, you are charged with dereliction of sacred duty, blasphemous disobedience, and the heresy of material compassion. He did not ask her to plead. The facts were not in dispute. The Vexillum Dominus is lost, defiled, used to summon the Neverborn. An entire sector of the city is now an open wound into the Imperium. This because you abandoned your post. Arabelle's voice was cracked, unused. She cleared her throat, tasting the dust of the floor. Confessor, I saved 1,200 souls. They were trapped. The heretics were— 1,200 souls, Malachi interrupted. The synthesized voice was incapable of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. It was the voice of a pronouncement, not a debate. Souls who now live, yes. They live to feel terror. They live to be hunted in a city that is falling. They live for a few more days or hours before the enemy finds them again. You did not save them, sister. You merely postponed their deaths at the cost of an eternal principle. One of the canonesses leaned forward, her voice a sharp counterpoint to Malachi's. You were given a direct order. You were tasked with the defense of a holy relic. You substituted your judgment for that of your superior. That is pride, sister, the root of all heresy. It was not pride. Arabelle's head snapped up, a spark of the old fire returning. The movement sent a fresh wave of agony through her screaming knees. It was a choice. I heard them screaming. I saw the choice. To stand and guard a thing while children were being butchered. A collective gasp, sharp and cold from the canonesses. Confessor Malachi raised one skeletal bionic hand. A thing. The words hung in the red air, impossibly heavy. She calls the Vexillum Dominus a thing. He leaned forward, the mechanisms in his chair whining. You still do not see, do you, child? You are blinded by the flesh. You see the Vexillum as cloth, as thread, as a symbol. You are wrong. It was faith. It was the Emperor's promise. It was an anchor of reality in the storm of the warp. Those 1,200 souls you saved, their flesh is weak. Their faith, as you have just demonstrated, is fallible. They are chaff. They are the Emperor's currency, meant to be spent in his name. He gestured to the window. Their lives are his to take. Their deaths are his to command. Who are you to intervene in that holy transaction? Who are you to decide that their fleeting, pathetic heartbeats are worth more than an eternal, sanctified icon of his divine will? Arabelle looked down. Her hands resting on her canvas-clad thighs were trembling. I acted to protect the innocent. There are no innocent, Malika roared, his vox unit crackling with sudden violent static. The force of it pushed Arabelle back as if struck. There is only the Emperor and those who have failed him. Your compassion was a lie, Arabelle. It was your own vanity. You wished to be a savior. You wished to be thanked. You wished to feel the warmth of their gratitude. He knew. He saw the memory of the little girl whispering, "Thank you." He saw it, and he named it sin. Your duty was not to save lives. Your duty was to obey. You failed. The line failed. The relic was lost. The city bleeds demons. This is the fruit of your compassion. Arabelle bowed her head. There was no defense. He had taken her reason, her logic, her very instinct, and shown her the heresy at its core. She had no argument. She had only her guilt. I am guilty, she whispered. Of course you are, the confessor rasped. The only question is the nature of your penance. The canoness on the far left spoke. She is a repentia. Let her be stripped and given the eviscerator. Let her find her end in the front lines. No, Malachi's voice cut her off. That is the path for the weak, for the cowardly, for the sister who fails in her aim or falters in the charge. Her sin is not of the hand, it is of the soul. It is a sin of belief. It is a fundamental corruption of her purpose. He paused, the hum of his life support filling the void. A swift death is a mercy she has not earned. An eviscerator is a blade of glory. She is not worthy of it. Her penance must be equal to her crime. She traded the eternal for the temporary. Therefore she will be bound to a machine that will burn her temporary flesh to fuel an eternal purpose. She sought to save the flesh of others. Her own flesh will be made an instrument of torment. Arabelle's blood ran cold. She knew then. She knew what he meant. Sister Arabelle, Confessor Malachi intoned, and his voice became the voice of the Imperium itself, cold, vast, and final. You are found guilty of all charges. You are hereby declared penitentia ultima. You are cast from the light of the Emperor. You are damned. He made a small, precise gesture. But in his infinite mercy, you are granted one final glorious opportunity for expiation. You will be given the blessing of the throne. You will be granted the holy release of the penitent engine. Your pain will be a hymn to his name. Your screams will be his battle cry. You will be unmade, and in your unmaking you will serve. Heavy booted footsteps echoed from the doorway behind her. The guards had come. Arabelle did not look up. She felt no fear, no anger, only a vast, crushing emptiness and a strange, cold flicker in the ruins of her heart. A desire, a need, the need to pay the price, to burn the sin away. I accept. She breathed the words stolen from her lips by the cold basalt floor. We know, the confessor rasped. It is not a request. The guards seized her arms, their gauntlets pinching her bare skin, and hauled her to her feet. They dragged her from the chamber of solemn adjudication, away from the accusing red light, and down into the darkness of the convent's deepest levels, towards the chapels of the damned. The steel shears were cold against her scalp. It was not a ritual of devotion like the symbolic tonsure of a novice. It was a shearing, rough, fast, and brutal like an animal being stripped of its fleece. Arabelle, kneeling on the wet, grimy floor of the processing cell, did not flinch. She watched her dark hair fall in clumps, mingling with the rust-colored filth on the stone. With each pass of the blade, she felt a piece of her old self being cut away. The woman who had led a squad, the woman who had laughed with Sister Ishani, the woman who had made a choice. She was being unmade. When the shears were done, a novice with a hard, unforgiving face brought over a small brazier. Another novice, her voice a monotone drone, read from a scroll. Let the mark of pride be unmade. Let the vanity of the flesh be scoured. A third figure, larger, cloaked in the black of a repentia, stepped forward. She held Arabelle's purity seals, the long wax-dripping parchments, each one a testament to a battle, one a prayer answered, a vow fulfilled. One by one, the repentia held them over the brazier. Arabelle watched the wax curl the parchment, blacken the blessed ink of her achievements, turn to smoke and ash. The smell of her own incinerated honor filled her nostrils. Let the false witness be consumed. Let the ledger be wiped clean by fire. The repentia's voice was a low growl laced with a disturbing, ecstatic pleasure. When the last seal was dust, the novice used a stubby brush to smear the ashes mixed with crude oil across Arabelle's newly shorn scalp. A mockery of an anointing. A baptism of shame. It is done, the novice said. She is no one. Send her to the scriptorum. The heavy iron door was thrown open. Arabelle was kicked, stumbling into a vast, cold, subterranean vault. The scriptorum was not a library. It was a dungeon of the soul. Dozens of other women, all in the same grey sackcloth shifts, were here. All were shorn. All bore the marks of flagellation on their backs and limbs. Some knelt, rocking back and forth, chanting in a dull, broken rhythm. Others were on their feet, using sharp stones to carve litanies of guilt into the damp stone walls. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, unhealed wounds, and despair. These were the fallen, the repentia, her new sisters. The heavy plasteel door at the far end of the vault slammed open, the sound echoing like a crack of judgment. Silence fell, absolute and terrified. The rocking and carving stopped. Every woman froze, their heads bowed. She entered. She was tall, encased in a form-fitting blackened carapace of armor that left her arms bare, revealing limbs corded with muscle and scar tissue. Her face was a mask of serene, terrifying piety, framed by the severe coif of her station. In her hand, she carried not a crozius, but a neural whip. This was Mistress Salome, the mistress of repentance, her new shepherd. Salome walked the length of the scriptorum, her boots clicking with sharp, metronomic precision. She stopped in front of a weeping novice no older than 16, who had been caught, hesitating. Tears chilled Salome's voice was like honeyed venom. Tears are for the weak. They are the water of the sin. You must pay with blood. The neural whip cracked faster than the eye could follow. It wasn't just a lash, it was a conduit. A blue-white arc of energy leaped from the whip's tip, striking the girl. The girl did not scream. Her body merely arched, every muscle seizing in a silent rictus of unimaginable electronic agony. She collapsed, twitching. Salome moved on her eyes, scanning the crowd. They found Arabelle. "Ah," she said, her voice dropping. "The proud one, the compassionate one." She circled Arabelle like a predator assessing its prey. Arabelle remained kneeling, her eyes fixed on the floor, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. "You are Arabelle," Salome stated. "You who thought you knew the Emperor's will better than your canoness. You who traded the eternal for the temporary. You who spat upon a holy relic to save chaff." Arabelle said nothing. There was nothing to say. Here Salome whispered, leaning close, her breath hot on Arabelle's ear. "We will unteach you. We will burn that pride from your mind just as we burned the seals from your history. Your life as you knew it is over." The days bled into an endless grey twilight. There was no night or day in the scriptorum, only the ringing of the iron bell. The bell for matins kneel on the broken stones for 3 hours, chanting the litanies of the unworthy. "My soul is a stain, my hands are unclean, my will is a lie." The bell for scourging line up. Salome and her novices would walk the line, the neural whips and electro-flails rising and falling. The pain was not punishment, it was instruction. This Salome would chant with every lash is the truth of the flesh. This is the voice of your sin. This is the mercy of the Emperor, the air filled with the smell of ozone and seared skin. The bell for rations, a single hard biscuit of grox meal and a cup of tepid metallic water. The bell for labor hauling refuse, scrubbing the floors of the upper convent, polishing the boots of the sisters who had not fallen. All in silence, all under the lash. The bell for vespers, more chanting, more kneeling. At first Arabelle resisted. In her mind she held on. She recited the canticle of faith. She remembered her vows, the true vows, the ones about protecting the helpless. But Salome saw it. She saw the unbroken spark in Arabelle's eyes. "You still cling to your heresy." Salome snarled, singling her out in the chanting line. The neural whip cracked against Arabelle's back. "You believe you were right, crack. You believe your reason matters, crack. You believe the Emperor cares for your petty justifications, crack. Crack, crack." The pain was beyond fire. It was a white-hot nova that exploded behind her eyes, eclipsing thought, eclipsing memory. It was pure, unadulterated agony. "He does not," Salome roared, her face contorted in a mask of righteous ecstasy. "He cares only for obedience, he demands only sacrifice. Your compassion was pride, Arabelle. Your choice was heresy. There is no justification, there is only the sin." Arabelle fell, her body a live wire of torment. She lay on the stones, the world reduced to a pulsing red haze. "Get up." She tried. Her limbs would not obey. "Get up, heretic. Your pain has only just begun." That night, Arabelle did not pray. She could not. The words were gone. The proud, righteous battle sister, the shield of the innocent, was gone. The cold, logical warrior who had made a calculated choice was a fool. Her faith did not just break. It shattered like a pane of glass struck by a power maul, and the pieces lay scattered in the filth of the scriptorum. She was not a warrior. She was not a sister. She was not even Arabelle. She was a sinner. She was a stain. She was guilt. A new feeling born in the hollowed-out ruin of her soul began to grow. It was a cold, sharp, desperate thing. She looked at her hands shaking in the dark. These were the hands that had abandoned their post. This was the mind that had thought its own thoughts. They were corrupt. They were unclean. Salome was right. Malachy was right. Her old life was a lie. Her pride was a sin. Her compassion was a terminal disease of the soul. There was only one cure, one absolution. She had to be destroyed. She had to be unmade. A new desire, a terrible burning thirst eclipsed all else. It was not a desire for freedom. It was not a desire for mercy. It was a burning, all-consuming, psychotic need for death. Not a simple end, but a death that would scour her clean. A death in fire, a death in violence, a death that would annihilate the very memory of the heretic Arabelle. She began to pray again, but it was a new prayer, a dark, hungry prayer, a prayer for an end, a prayer for destruction, a prayer for forgiveness, not through peace, but through total, absolute, and violent obliteration. She wanted to burn, she wanted to kill, she wanted to die in the Emperor's name, and in the inferno of that death to finally be clean. She lost track of the bells. The cycle of pain, prayer, and starvation had become a single grey, unending moment. Arabelle was no longer a person. She was a vessel of guilt, hollowed out, and waiting to be filled. She knelt in the scriptorum, her hands raw, from carving the litany of the unworthy into the stone floor for the 1,000th time. My mind is the heretic. My heart is the traitor. My flesh is the sin. The words were no longer a punishment. They were a catechism. They were the only truth she had left. The iron door to the dungeon opened, but this time it was not the sharp click of Mistress Salome's boots that followed. It was the rhythmic thud hiss of Mechanicus. Confessor Malachy entered his withered, enthroned body, carried by 2 hulking, silent servitors. The other Repentia cowered, pressing themselves against the walls, as if his very presence was a physical weight. He glided over the floor, the mechanisms of his chair disturbing the filth, and stopped directly in front of Arabelle. She did not look up, but continued her carving, her broken fingernail tracing the word traitor. "She is ready." Malachy's synthesized voice rasped. Mistress Salome, who had entered behind him, nodded. "She is receptive, Confessor. Her pride is broken. All that remains is the sin." "Good." Malachy's vox clicked. "Look at me, Arabelle." Slowly, obediently, she raised her head. Her eyes were sunken, hollowed, but in their depths Malachy saw the cold, burning ember he had been waiting for, the desperate, nihilistic yearning for oblivion. "Your guilt is profound," he stated. "It is a living thing, a great dark star of heresy. It has consumed you. This is as it should be." He gestured, and one of the servitors roughly hauled Arabelle to her feet. "Mistress Salome's methods are for the common sinner." Malachy continued, his voice a dry monotone. "A lash for a moment of weakness, an eviscerator for a failure of the arm. But your sin, child, was of the soul. You did not just fail. You chose. You placed your tiny, flawed reason above the divine, eternal word of your canoness." He began to move, and the servitors dragged Arabelle behind him, her bare feet scraping on the stone. Such a sin cannot be cleansed by a simple, glorious death in combat. It is too deep. The stain is too dark. A quick end would be a mercy, and you have not earned mercy. You have only earned a purpose." They left the scriptorum climbing dark, iron-runged stairs, moving from the cold, damp dark of the dungeons into a new kind of hell. The air grew hot, acrid. The sound of 1,000 hammers, the hiss of plasma, and the grating of massive gears filled her ears. They were in the Mechanicus Forges, the vast cathedral-like annex, where the war machines of the Order were repaired and consecrated. They emerged onto a high, grilled gantry overlooking a chasm of industry. Below them, servitors and red-robed tech priests moved like ants, tending to engines of war. Damaged rhinos, scarred immolators, and even a mighty exorcist tank were being re-sanctified with sacred oils and binary chants. "You thirst for forgiveness, do you not?" Malachi's voice cut through the din. Arabelle's lips moved a dry, cracked sound. I must be clean." "Yes," Malachi said, a sound that might have been satisfaction. "But your soul is too heavy to be lifted by prayer alone. It must be burned clean. Your sin is a furnace, Arabelle. We will not extinguish it. We will use it. We will make it the engine of your redemption." He pointed with a skeletal bionic finger. "Behold, the path for the greatest of sinners. Your salvation." Arabelle followed his gesture. There, in the center of the forge floor, isolated in a bay of its own, it stood. It was not being repaired. It was being prepared. It was a colossus of iron and rage, a 30-foot-tall mockery of a human form. The Penitent engine. Its spiked feet were bolted to the floor, its massive multi-jointed arms one ending in a pair of titanic oily buzzsaws, the other in the triple-mouthed maw of a heavy flamer, were raised in a posture of horrific praise. It was not a vehicle. It was an iron cross, a walking throne of torture. And at its front, where a cockpit should be, was only an exposed framework of metal ribs and spikes, a nightmarish web of thick cables, injectors, and neural plugs, all centered on the cruel vertical mount where the pilot, the sinner, would be impaled. She saw tech priests cleaning it, anointing its joints, chanting to its dormant, angry machine spirit. It looked hungry. It looked perfect. "The lesser repentia are given a blade," Malachi whispered, his voice in her ear. "They wield the instrument of their penance. But you, Arabelle, you will become the instrument. You will be its heart. Your nerves will be its wiring. Your agony will be its fuel. Every bullet that strikes its hull you will feel. Every life your saws take you will feel. Every heretic you burn your flesh will feel the heat." He leaned closer, his cold metal breath mask touching her shorn head. "Your body will be destroyed piece by piece. Your mind will be burned away thought by thought, and in that glorious, agonizing inferno your sin will be annihilated. You will become a screaming, burning prayer, a hymn of steel and torment offered in his name." Arabelle stared. She did not see a machine of torture. She saw an answer. She saw the end of the guilt. She saw the fire that would finally burn away the memory of the manufactorum, the child's thank you, the pride, the choice. Tears, hot and sudden, streamed from her hollow eyes. They were not tears of fear. They were tears of profound, ecstatic relief. This was the absolution she craved. This was the death she needed. "The throne of agony is an honor," Malachi intoned, "a terrible, glorious gift. Do you accept this penance, Arabelle? Do you accept this path to his forgiveness?" Arabelle sank to her knees on the gantry, her gaze locked on the machine below. Her hands raw and bleeding clasped together in the first true prayer she had offered since her fall. Her voice was a rasp, a plea, a desperate final surrender. "Please," she wept, bowing her head to the iron colossus. "I am the sin, I am the guilt. Please, let me burn." Confessor Malachi almost smiled. The tool was forged. The breaking was complete. "So be it," he rasped. "Your atonement is at hand. take her to the engine seers. The Adeptus Mechanicus has claimed her. The transition was not a ceremony. It was a transaction. Mistress Salome, her work of spiritual destruction complete, shoved Arabelle forward into a new chamber, a demarcation line of cold blue light. On one side, the damp, despairing stone of the convent. On the other, the riveted, oily steel of the Mechanicus enclave. "The asset is delivered," Salome announced to the shadows. A figure emerged, separating itself from a wall of whirring cogitators. It was not human, not really. It was a tech priest engine seer, but one of high station. His red robes were heavy, stained with sacred oils. Where a man's legs would be, there were only clicking, spider-like metallic limbs. His face was a smooth, polished brass plate with 7 spider-like optics of glowing green light that all focused independently on Arabelle. A bundle of mechadendrites snaking metal tentacles sprouted from his back, their tips ending in probes, injectors, and tiny whirring saws. His voice when it came was a burst of static, a monotone binary cant. 0101 111 0911 0910 1111 0911 0910 0101 0110 0111 0101 0110. Acknowledged. The consignment of biocomponent 74 Arabelle is accepted. He made a clicking sound. Your spiritual preparations are inefficient. Crude. They leave scar tissue on the neural pathways. The component is purged of its pride, as commanded by the confessor, Salome hissed, clearly disgusted by the creature. Her soul is hollow, ready for the machine spirit. The soul is a flawed electrochemical process, the engine seer who identified himself only as Magos Technicus 8 Clin replied. We are not concerned with it. We are concerned with receptivity. Leave us. The Omnissiah's work begins. Salome gave Arabelle one last look, a look of pious hatred, and turned her boots ringing on the steel as she retreated to her world of stone and pain. The heavy bulkhead door hissed shut, sealing with the finality of a tomb. Arabelle was left alone with the machine man. The cold was immediate. The scriptorum had been damp and chilling, but this was a sterile, refrigerated cold. It was the cold of a morgue. The air smelled of sharp, antiseptic chemicals, hot metal, and a strange, ozone-like tang that prickled her nostrils. The only sounds were the constant, low-frequency hum of generators, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of data printers, and the whisper of binary prayers from hidden vox emitters. This was not a place of faith. It was a laboratory, a vivisection chamber. Component 7748 Clin stated his multiple optics scanning her. You are no longer a person. You are not a sinner to be punished. You are an organic interface. You are the wetware. You will serve as the primary processing unit for the Divina Dolorem, the divine pain. Your function is to feel, to process agony, and to translate that agony into motive force. Nothing more. He did not seem angry. He did not seem cruel. He seemed bored, like a functionary processing a new piece of equipment. One of his mechadendrites snaked out its polished steel tip, unfolding into a fine, sharp needle. It pricked Arabelle's neck, drawing a single bead of blood. She didn't flinch. She had been taught by Salome that to flinch was to acknowledge the self. The probe retracted. Ait Clin paused, his head tilting as he processed the data. Hormone levels acceptable. Adrenal response high. Cortisol saturation optimal. The Ministerum's crude behavioral conditioning has created a prime neurochemical state for integration. The machine spirit's rage will bond well with this level of self-loathing. He turned his metal legs, clicking on the grating. Follow. Arabelle followed. She was a ghost in the machine's temple. They passed servitors, lobotomized, vat-grown humans, fused with mechanisms, their flesh pale and waxy. Some were mere arms attached to conveyor belts polishing shells. Others were walking fuel tanks. None looked at her. She was just another piece of meat moving through the factory. They entered the main vault. And there it was, the Penitent engine. Seen from the gantry, it was a terrifying icon. Here on the forge floor, it was a greasy, terrible reality. It was opened up, its chest cavity splayed wide like a medical subject. The iron cross that formed its cockpit was revealed for what it was, a spinal column of thick black cables, a rib cage of curved steel restraints, and a heart of humming, glowing capacitors. It was not a cockpit. It was not a throne. It was a socket. A human-shaped socket designed to hold a living body in a state of permanent crucifixion. Hundreds of wires, tubes, and data spikes, each one meticulously cleaned and sharpened by attendant servo skulls, bristled from the machine's inner framework, ready to be plugged into flesh. The air around it was heavy with the smell of promethium and the hot, angry copper smell of its dormant machine spirit. The Divina Dolorem 8 Clin intoned a flicker of something like reverence in his static voice. A holy relic, a pattern of vengeance. It does not accept a pilot, it devours them. Its machine spirit is primal. It is not a cogitator, it is a captured, distilled fury. It hates you, it hates the heretic, it hates everything. Your function is to agree with it, to lend your pain to its rage. Arabelle stared at the exposed framework. She saw the great blunt spike designed to interface with the base of the skull. She saw the cluster of injectors aimed at where the heart would be. She saw the brutal clamps for the limbs. She saw her absolution. "It is beautiful," she whispered, her voice a dry, cracked husk. 8 Clin's optics all snapped to her face. For a moment he was silent. 01 0 0 0 01 no 101 01 01 01 01 deviation. Aesthetic appreciation is illogical. It is functional. He gestured to a cold steel slab shaped like a medical table, but with heavy iron shackles. Position yourself. Prone. Arabelle obeyed. She lay flat on the steel. The cold was so intense it was a burning pain in itself. Immediately the shackles snapped shut over her ankles, her wrists, her waist, and her neck, holding her immobile. Preparation for interfacing will now commence, 8 Clin stated. A large, multi-armed servo unit descended from the ceiling, its limbs bristling with tools, razors, drills, cauterizers, and data spikes. Arabelle looked up at the whirring, clicking metallic thing that was about to descend on her. She felt the last vestiges of the woman, Arabelle, flicker and die. That woman was afraid of pain of death. The thing on the table, component 774, was not. The flesh is weak, 8 Clin chanted, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of a litany. It must be fortified with steel. A mechadendrite from his own back extended, holding a large, humming electric razor. It descended toward the back of Arabelle's head, where her hair had begun to grow back in a fine stubble. The bone is ignorant. It must be taught by the drill. Another servo arm clicked, selecting a fine-toothed adamantium-tipped drill bit. The mind is chaotic. It must be shackled by the spirit. Arabelle closed her eyes. The scriptorum had broken her mind. Now the tech priest would break her body. She did not pray for deliverance. She did not pray for mercy. She prayed for the machine to take her. She prayed for the pain to begin. The razor buzzed to life, its cold, vibrating teeth touching the skin at the base of her skull. It was the first cold kiss of her new and final god. The steel slab, her preparation altar, hissed and tilted. Heavy, multi-jointed servo arms gleaming with sanctified oils descended from the ceiling. They were not gentle. Their cold, pincer-like claws clamped onto her bare limbs, lifting her from the table as unceremoniously as a piece of scrap metal. She was suspended in the frigid air for a moment, a pale, shorn, and exposed offering. Then she was moved. She was brought to the machine, to the Divina Dolorem. The open waiting framework of the cockpit was her cross, and the servitors were her executioners. They pressed her back against the central iron spine of the machine. The metal was not just cold, it was vibrating, humming with a low, dormant power that she felt in her very bones. Thud. Heavy steel bands, thick as a man's arm, slammed shut around her wrists, her ankles, her waist, and her chest, locking her in place, spread-eagled and facing outward. She was the figurehead of this ship of damnation. The hard, unyielding framework pressed into her back, the metal ribs of the throne biting into her flesh. She was exposed, vulnerable, and utterly immobile. Magos 8 Klin glided forward his cluster of green optics, all focusing on the point where her shorn scalp met her neck. The hole freshly drilled by the razor servitor was a raw, weeping circle of exposed bone. The Ministorum believes pain is a punishment, 8 Klin's static voice intoned. His mechadendrites activated, rising from his back like a nest of steel serpents. Their tips gleamed with surgical implements, drills, cauterizers, and long silver data spikes. They are wrong. Pain is data. Pain is the purest, most unfiltered signal. Anesthetic is a lie. It is a corruption of the signal. It is blasphemy to the Omnissiah. You will feel every connection. The machine spirit demands to know its pilot. It will taste your agony, and in that taste it will find communion. Arabelle did not reply. She stared forward into the gloom of the forge, her breath fogging in the cold. She was ready. Let me burn. We begin with the spine 8 Klin announced. The Rosary of Binding. A mechadendrite, its tip, a high-pitched adamantium-tipped drill, moved to the base of her spine. Arabelle tensed. There was no warning. The drill bit into her. It was not a simple pain. It was a violation. The sound, a high-pitched zee, vibrated inside her, transmitted through her own skeleton. She felt the drill pierce the skin, the muscle, and then the horrific grinding crunch as it bit into her lowest vertebra. Her entire body arched against the restraints, a single, soundless scream trapped in her throat. The smell of her own powdered bone filled the air. The drill retracted, leaving a raw, open hole. Connection Primus, the Root 8 Klin chanted. A second mechadendrite moved in carrying a thick, black-ribbed cable that ended in a glistening silver spike. It paused over the hole. Interface. The spike was driven home with a pneumatic thump. Arabelle's world exploded. It was not pain. It was signal. A tidal wave of cold, blue-white information flooded her nervous system. She felt weight, the immense crushing weight of the machine's legs. She felt the coldness of the forge floor not through her feet, but through the massive spiked platforms bolted to the ground 30 feet below her. She felt the hydraulic pressure, the cold, viscous fluid, the dormant power. She screamed, a raw, howling sound of pure sensory overload. Silence 8 Klin commanded, though his voice was impassive. Process the data. Do not fight it. Become it. He did not wait. The drill moved up. Vertebra secundus, the conduit of motion. Zee! Crunch. Another scream tore from her. The second spike was hammered in. Thump! Her own legs vanished. In her mind, she no longer had knees. She had reverse-jointed pistons. She felt the urge to stomp a crushing tectonic impulse that was not her own. The machine's dormant motive systems twitched the entire 30-foot colossus, groaning and shifting a single terrifying inch. Connection Tertius, the web of agony. The drill moved higher between her shoulder blades. Zee! Crunch. Thump. This time it was her skin. Her entire skin. She felt the pockmarks on the machine's outer hull. She felt the cold air on every square inch of its adamantium hide. A servitor polishing the machine's shoulder plate sent a jolt of pleasure pain through her like a rough caress. She could feel the outside of the engine as if it were her own flesh. Connection Quartus, the vessel of wrath, the drill, the spike, thump, the heavy flamers. She could feel them. They were her. They were her hands, her fists. She felt the reservoirs of promethium, a cold, volatile sickness in her gut. She felt the pilot lights a tiny, hot spark in what felt like her knuckles. A sudden, overwhelming urge to open her hands and burn the world, to cleanse it in a torrent of holy fire washed over her. Connection Quintus, the teeth of absolution, thump, the buzzsaws, they were her other hand. She felt the weight of the adamantium teeth, the grinding hunger of the motors, the need to rend, to tear, to shred flesh and bone. She was a weapon. She was no longer a human. She was a walking, sentient instrument of brutal execution. She was sobbing now, great gasping, involuntary cries. Her mind herself was a tiny, flickering candle in a hurricane of alien sensation and mechanical instinct. "It is done," Aitklin said. "The rosary is bound. The flesh is networked." He glided around to face her, his 7 green optics staring into her weeping, terrified eyes. And now the marriage, the final holy union, the crowning of the penitentia. He raised a new mechadendrite, this one holding a heavy black metal circlet. It was not a helmet. It was a surgical tool, a halo of spikes and injectors. At its back, a single massive serrated data port thick as a bolt shell was aligned. The corona machina, the mind impulse unit. The servo arms holding her still Aitklin lowered the crown onto her head. The inner spikes dug into her shorn scalp, drawing blood. It was heavy and cold and final. The main spike, the neural jack, hovered directly over the weeping, drilled hole at the base of her skull. "You are Arabelle Aitklin," intoned his voice for the first time, approaching something like ceremony. "The sinner, the flawed, the organic." He gestured to the machine. "This is the Divina Dolorum, the pure, the holy, the machine." He raised a fist. "By the will of the Omnissiah and the decree of the Confessor, I pronounce you one." He slammed his fist down on a large red activation rune. With a sound like a cannon shot, the pneumatic driver fired. The massive MIU spike was hammered violently, impossibly into the base of her skull, through the bone, and deep into her brain stem. Thwack! There was no pain. There was no sensation. There was only contact. Arabelle's mind, her consciousness, her very soul, was ripped from her body and thrown into an ocean of pure, boiling, ancient rage. It was the machine spirit. It was not an AI. It was not a cogitator. It was a beast, an elemental, primal, simplistic hatred. It was the distilled fury of every pilot who had died in this machine. It was the anger of the tech priests who forged its plates. It was the cold, unblinking malice of the metal itself. It roared. It roared with the need to kill. It roared with the pain of existence. It roared with a hatred for the flesh, the weak, soft, sinful flesh of the new component that had just been jammed into its holy workings. Get out! Get out! Weak! Filth! Heretic! Burn! Kill! Tear! Get out! The MIU, the marriage, was not a union. It was a war. It was the machine rage trying to annihilate her and her own newly forged, self-loathing, broken mind, screaming back, "Yes! Yes, I am filth! I am heresy! I am the sin! Burn me! Use me! Kill! Forgive me! Kill!" Her scream was no longer human. It was a shriek of metal on metal, a roar of static and blood, a sound of two consciousnesses. One human, one machine, both utterly broken and insane, locked in a singular, violent, ecstatic embrace of pure hatred. Arabelle was gone. Component 774 was online. The Penitent engine was awake. She was a raw nerve staked out in a hurricane of hate. Her consciousness fused with the feral machine spirit was a battleground. Burn, kill, weak, flesh. The machine roared in her skull, a constant abrasive static of pure malice. And her own broken soul screamed back, "Yes, I am weak. I am the sin. Let me burn." They were two entities locked in a feedback loop of self-loathing and mindless fury. But this was not enough. Rage was an engine, but it was unfocused. Pain was data, but it was chaotic. The Omnissiah demanded control. The Ministorum demanded purpose. The pilot was not meant to be rage. She was meant to be conducted by it, a tool shaped by a master's hand. Magos 8 Klin observed the data feed, his green optics impassive. The component's vital signs were spectacular. Heart rate at 220. Neural activity spiking into seizure territory. Electrochemical output equivalent to a small generator. The fusion was a success. Now the calibration. The synaptic marriage is complete, his static voice announced to the empty forge. The machine spirit is dominant. Now we introduce the liturgies of control, the sacred chemical catechism. He had not been idle while she was screaming. A new set of mechadendrites tipped with fine, glittering silver-blue needles had been preparing. They whirred forward, hovering over the exposed flesh of Arabelle's arms and chest, still locked in the iron embrace of the machine. The flesh is a river, he chanted a litany of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And faith is the current. We shall direct the flow. The needles descended. They did not just prick her skin. They were intravenous, intra-arterial. They punched through skin and sinew with brutal pneumatic force, seeking her major blood vessels. One plunged deep into her neck, finding the carotid. Two more slammed into her inner elbows. A fourth, the largest, was driven directly into her chest, just above her heart, a brutalist injector designed to deliver a massive payload directly to the primary muscle. Thump. Thump, thump, thump. Arabelle's body, already convulsing from the neural shock, seized violently. The war in her head paused, eclipsed by a new, invasive coldness. Begin the first canticle, the flame of righteous hate. Clear, viscous fluid began to pump from whining reservoirs on 8 Klin's back, through the tubes and into her veins. It was not a drug. It was fury. A synthetic purpose-brewed combat stimulant, a cocktail of slort, frenzon, and other darker compounds proprietary to the forge. It hit her heart like a power maul. The world dissolved. The coldness was replaced by a fire that erupted from the inside out. Her blood boiled. Every nerve ending already screaming from the neural links now felt like it was being simultaneously frozen and burned. The machine spirit's rage had been a roar. This was a nova. It was a chemical command to destroy. The need to kill, to tear, to burn became a physical, biological imperative, as urgent and undeniable as the need to breathe. Kill, 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 kill. The word was no longer a thought. It was her heartbeat. Second canticle. The tears of the Emperor. A second darker fluid, almost black, joined the first. It was not a stimulant. It was its opposite and its partner. It was a pain agonist, a chemical designed not to dull but to amplify. It systematically stripped away her mind's ability to cope, to compartmentalize, to dull the sensory input. The humming vibration of the machine's dormant reactor became a billion needles driven into her bones. The cold steel restraints on her wrists felt like they were actively crushing her limbs into pulp. The very air of the forge touching her exposed skin felt like a flaying knife. The pain was no longer data. It was her universe. It was all-consuming, absolute, and impossibly, unbearably bright. She was a son of pure agony, and the rage stimulant was the fuel that kept her from collapsing into a black hole of unconsciousness. She had to be awake for this. That was the point, and then the final phase. A heavy segmented iron visor shaped like the faceplate of an imperial saint slammed down from above. It was not a blast shield. It did not have optics to see the outside world. It covered her face, her eyes, her mouth, and sealed her inside. The inside of the mask was a lightless void. Third canticle. The scripture of guilt. A click, a hiss. The mask flared to life. It was not a view screen. It was a torture device for the soul. A single image flashed into life, burned onto her retinas, centimeters from her eyes. The Vexillum Dominus. Not the proud banner she had known, but the defiled one. tattered, smeared with filth, held aloft by a jeering, triumphant word-bearer. Thud. A single percussive sound amplified in her ears. The image vanished, replaced by another. The face of the child in the manufactorum. The little girl, her eyes wide, whispering, "Thank you." Thud. The image of the defiled vexillum again. Heresy. Thud. The face of Canoness Lyra, her expression of cold, righteous fury. "You traded eternity for chaff." Thud. The vexillum. Thud. The child. Thud. The Canoness. Thud. The images began to accelerate. Vexillum, child, Canoness, failure, pride, heresy, sin, sin, sin. It was a psychological hammer beating her mind into a single, simplistic shape. The stimulants made her rage. The pain agonists shattered her resistance. And the images gave her focus, her compassion, her choice. That was the enemy. The child she saved was not an innocent, it was the physical manifestation of her sin. The face of the child became as hateful to her as the face of the demon. Thud, 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 thud. The faces began to blur, to merge with the images of the heretics, the aliens, the traitors. The child's face became the heretic's face. The Canoness's face became the Emperor's, vast, golden, and accusing. Kill, sin, burn, guilt, forgiveness, pain. The cocktail was complete. A body pumped full of agonizing, rage-inducing chemicals. A mind fused with an alien, hateful machine intelligence. A soul shattered and reprogrammed by a relentless, high-speed litany of its own failure. Arabelle Component 74, the Penitent, threw back her head inside the iron mask and screamed. It was a scream of such profound, all-encompassing agony, physical, chemical, spiritual, that it was no longer a human sound. It was the sound of a soul being boiled alive. But the machine was ready for this. A Vox pickup embedded in the mask's throat guard caught the sound. It did not muffle it. It harvested it. The raw, psychochemical shriek was fed through a bank of filters. It was amplified, distorted, given a metallic, resonant echo. It was blended with the synthesized binary roar of the machine spirit. And then it was broadcast. A bank of massive horn-like speakers mounted on the Penitent engine's shoulders, the Vox Sanctus blasted to life for the first time. Wah! The sound that erupted into the forge was not a scream. It was a hymn, a terrible, deafening, soul-shattering battle cry. It was the sound of agony made divine. It was the sound of damnation given a voice. It was the unholy, terrifying, righteous hymn of the Penitent, and it was the last sound its enemies would ever hear. Magos 8 Klin's optics adjusted for the sudden, deafening volume. He observed his readouts. The integration was perfect. The component was online. The weapon was forged. He made a note in the data log. Phase 2, control, matrix complete. Asset is now, acquire. Awaiting field test. The war in her skull reached a crescendo. The thing that was Arabelle, the broken, screaming, guilt-ridden shard of a woman, and the thing that was the machine spirit, the ancient, elemental, metallic rage had been fighting for dominance, a battle of flesh and iron within the prison of her mind. The chemicals were the accelerant, the strobe-lit images of her sin, the relentless hammer blows. It was an unstable, unsustainable reaction. It had to resolve, and then it did. It was not a victory for one side. It was a collapse, a total catastrophic fusion. It was the moment the machine spirit in its primitive feral state recognized the quality of Arabelle's self-hatred. It was a perfect mirror of its own rage. Her guilt was its fuel. Her pain was its ecstasy. It stopped trying to expel the flesh. It began to feed on it. Simultaneously, the last flickering ember of Arabelle's reasoning mind shattered by the chemical onslaught and the psychological torture saw the machine spirit not as an invader, but as an answer. It was the pure, uncomplicated wrath of the Emperor himself. It was the divine instrument of her absolution. To fight it was sin. To merge with it was salvation. Yes. The two thoughts, kill and yes, became one. The feedback loop of hate and guilt synchronized. The war ended. A new singular consciousness was born from the wreckage, a terrible unified it. The screaming inside her head stopped, replaced by a vast, cold, resonant hum. The hum of a 30-foot-tall engine of death waiting for a command. The screaming that continued to pour from the voxcasters was no longer a sound of torment. It was a sound of purpose. It was the triumphant, terrible birth cry of the Penitent. With this fusion came the second death, the death of the flesh. Arabelle's body, the small 5'10" frame of a woman, was still there. It was still shackled, impaled, and convulsing. The pain agonists were still flooding her system, reporting the agony of the restraints, the sting of the cold air, the fire of the injectors. But Arabelle, the Penitent, no longer cared. That pain was a distant, trivial thing. It was a flickering red light on a massive command console, an indicator light for organic component status nominal. It was background noise. The real senses, the true senses, were the machines. Her consciousness, now unified with the Divina Dolorum, expanded. It poured out of her skull, down the neural links, and filled the 30-foot chassis. She was no longer a woman trapped in a machine. She was the machine. Her feet were gone. In their place, she felt two massive adamantium-shod spiked platforms, their connection to the forge floor a cold, solid fact. She felt the immense, dormant power in the reverse-jointed legs, a coiled spring potential for a 30-mile-per-hour, ground-shaking stomp. Her arms were gone. Her right hand was now a 5,000-pound assembly of articulated metal, ending in two counter-rotating diamond-tipped buzzsaws. She could feel the edge of every single tooth. She could feel the cold, thick grease in their motors. She could feel the unholy thirst in them, the pure mechanical desire to rend. Her left hand was a tri-barreled heavy flamer unit. She felt the weight of the promethium in the tanks on her back. It was a cold, sloshing presence, a promise of fiery cleansing. She could feel the three pilot lights, three tiny hot sparks in her knuckles, waiting for the command to unleash a torrent of liquid fire. Her skin was no longer flesh. It was 10 inches of pock-marked, blessed, battle-scarred adamantium plate. She could feel the cold kiss of the forge air on the back of her neck, the massive reactor housing. She could feel the faint, irritating vibration of the servo skull that was still polishing her shoulder. The body of Arabelle was now just a biological battery, a wetware processor plugged into the chest of her real body. Its sole function was to feel the agony that the Ministorum demanded, and to process the rage that the Mechanicus required. The self that had once been Sister Arabelle was now just a single critical component in a much larger and much more terrible whole. The past was not erased. It was refactored. The memories of Lyra Prime, the screams of the civilians, the face of the child, the judgment of the canoness, the agony of Salome's whip, they were no longer memories. They were not a history. They were her operating system. They were the why. The machine spirit was the what. Kill. The chemical cocktail was the how, with hate, with pain. The psychological programming was the focus. Sinners. Arabelle, the person, the self, the chooser, was dead. She had died on the surgical slab, crucified on an iron cross, and reborn as this thing. The Penitent, a creature with no name, no past, and no future. A being of pure, synthesized, and consecrated purpose. The images flickering inside her iron mask were no longer accusations. They were targets. The child's face was a symbol of her sin. The heretic's face was the object of her redemption. There was no difference. All flesh was guilt. All existence was sin. And she, the Penitent, was the instrument of absolution. Her purpose was not complex. It was brutally, beautifully simple. She existed to find the sin. She existed to purge the sin. She would purge it with fire. She would purge it with steel. She would scream her agonizing, ecstatic hymn as she did so. And in the fire that consumed her enemies, she would piece by bloody piece burn away her own. All that was left was the mission, the singular burning, all-consuming imperative that had replaced her soul. The world was a screaming, red-hot, stationary hell. The Penitent was a being of pure potential, a bomb waiting to detonate a nexus of agony, chemicals, and machine rage. It was anchored, bolted, incomplete. Then a new sound. A series of explosive thuds felt not heard as the pneumatic clamps securing its feet to the forge floor were released. The connection was severed. The anchor was lifted. For the first time, the Penitent was free, and the Divina Dolorem was active. The transition was not a boot-up. It was a jolt. It was the feeling of a mountain being dropped onto her. A dull, thrumming whoomp vibrated up from her new back as the promethium-fed reactor roared from dormant to full, furious life. Heat. A crushing internal volcanic heat bloomed behind her, the furnace of her own power. It was a stark contrast to the refrigerated air of the forge, which now felt like a billion stinging needles on her skin, the adamantium hull. The sloshing of the promethium tanks was a cold, sick weight. The hydraulic fluid in her new limbs felt like a high-pressure river flowing through her, a current of immense, barely contained power. The distant humming rage of the machine spirit in her skull was no longer a hum. It was a roar, a deafening, constant, white-hot static that demanded motion, demanded violence. The scream that had been pouring from her voxcasters, the amplified, distorted cry of her birth, was now her voice. It was her breathing. A constant, deafening, metallic shriek of, "I am pain, I am guilt, I am wrath." She was a 30-foot-tall colossus of sensation, and it was all agony, and it was all glorious. A new sensation cut through the din. It was not a sound. It was not a light. It was a packet. A cold, precise string of binary code injected directly into her consciousness through the MIU spike. It was the voice of her new god. It was Magos 8 Klin. The command was simple. Walk. The Penitent did not. It was not defiance. It was paralysis. The Arabelle shard of her mind, the self, was a terrified pinprick of memory. It knew how to walk with legs of flesh. It had no concept of how to command these 2-ton reverse-jointed pistons, how the machine spirit, the Divina Dolorem, actively resented the command. It was not a soldier. It was not an ox. It was rage. It did not want to walk. It wanted to destroy. It wanted to burn. No, kill, stomp, burn, no! The new fused consciousness of the Penitent was a paradox. It was a creature of pure, mindless hate built for the sole purpose of obedience. The command was walk. The instinct was kill. The result was stasis. The Colossus stood frozen, its reactor roaring its vox, screaming its chassis, vibrating with the contained, conflicting energies. Hesitation. A flaw in the system. A sin. Magos 8 Klin, observing his data slate, saw the logical conflict. The biocomponent was failing its first test. He did not repeat the command. He activated the motivator. The system registered the mismatch. Command ambulate. Action stasis. The injectors in her heart, chest, and arms, which had been pumping the agonizing, nominal cocktail, fired. It was not a new drug. It was a flood. The reservoirs of the tears of the Emperor, the pure pain agonist, were opened. If the nominal state was a sun of agony, this was a supernova. It was a white, blinding, infinite pain that eclipsed the reactor's heat, the machine's roar, the rage, the chemicals, everything. It was the sound of every atom in her body being torn apart, amplified 1 trillion times. It was not a sensation. It was the only sensation. The universe was gone. There was only this. The scream that tore from her voxcasters was no longer a hymn. It was a sound of pure system-overloading electronic death. It was a shriek so high and so loud that it cracked the lenses on nearby servo skulls. And with it came the lesson. A new data packet, cold and clear through the white-hot fire. The choice was simple. The lesson was brutal. Resist, and this is your eternity. Obey, and you may return to the mere hell of before. Nominal agony. The feeling of being boiled alive and flayed. It was now a refuge. It was a reward. Through the blinding, absolute torment, the Penitent learned. It did not think. It reacted. How to make it stop compliance. What is compliance walk? It focused every erg of its will, its rage, its guilt, its entire being on a single thought. A thought of forward. It willed its new leg to move. CHRRRAAANK. The sound was deafening. The sound of a collapsing building. The left leg, a 2-ton hammer of pistons and steel, dragged itself forward. The spiked foot slammed into the plasteel and stone floor with a force that sent cracks spider-webbing outward. The entire forge bay shook, and the pain, it receded. The supernova vanished. It did not go away. It simply dropped from infinite back to absolute. Back to the nominal state of being a living, burning nerve. But it was relief. It was a cool shadow in the heart of a sun. It was ecstasy. The Penitent gasped, a sound lost in its own vox scream. It had learned. It took another step, SCHRAANK, the right leg. The floor cracked again. The relief was still there. It took another, and another, a lurching, chaotic, terrifyingly fast charge. It was not walking. It was a stomp, a rampage, a rhythmic, ground-shaking tantrum of steel. It had learned. It did not pilot with skill. It piloted with compliance. It piloted by channeling its unstoppable rage in the direction its master commanded, because the alternative was an agony beyond even its comprehension. A heavy, reinforced bulkhead wall slid open with a metallic groan, revealing a deep, darkened alcove. Inside, chained to the back wall with thick, rusty chains, was a servitor. It was a failed experiment, a lobotomized heretic whose body had rejected the bionics. Its flesh was withered, its one remaining organic eye, wide and milky with mindless terror. It was a piece of chaff. It was marked for decommissioning. It was sin. The iron mask on the Penitent's face, the Corona Machina, flared to life. The images flashed. The face of the terrified servitor. Thud. The face of the child from the manufactorum. Thank you. Thud. The face of the word-bearer defiling the vexillum. Thud. The face of the servitor. Thud. The face of the child. Thud. The face of the heretic. Sin, 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 filth, pride, heresy, guilt. The faces blurred, merged. The servitor was the heretic. The child was the sin. It was all one. It was all guilt. The Penitent did not need the pain motivator this time. The command was not a restriction. It was a release. The rage, the guilt, the chemicals, the machine spirit. They all found their focus. Target. Sin. Kill. The Penitent did not lurch. It charged. SCHRAANK, SCHRAANK. It covered the distance to the alcove. In 2 ground-shaking, loping strides, its reactor howling. It raised its right hand. The buzzsaws. Whirr! The sound of 1,000,000 dentists' drills. The Penitent felt the motors spin to life, a joyous, bone-jarring vibration that it interpreted as hunger. The hunger of the machine spirit. The hunger for absolution. It crashed into the alcove. The chained servitor let out a single wet gurgle. The buzzsaws descended. CRRRIEEEAAAACH. It was not a cut. It was an annihilation. The Penitent felt it. It felt the resistance of the weak flesh, soft the bionics, hard the bone, satisfying. It felt the tearing and the rending as a spray of blood oil and sparks erupted, coating its own chassis. It was not pain. It was not pleasure. It was release. It was purpose. It was purging. The The vox scream hit a new ecstatic pitch. It hacked again and again. Screech! Screech! It dismembered the servitor, the chains, the very wall behind it. The rage stimulants flooded its system, a chemical reward for this act of holy violence. But it was not clean. The sin was mangled, but its stain remained. It raised its left hand, the flamer. It willed the cleansing. Oosh! A torrent of liquid gelid fire erupted from its knuckles. The alcove became an inferno. The penitent felt the heat not as pain, but as a warmth. A purifying, glorious, holy warmth. It was the Emperor's embrace. It was the fire of forgiveness. It held the flame bathing the alcove in promethium until the mangled, shredded remains were nothing but blackened carbon, melted slag, and steam. The penitent stood back, its chassis shuddering with the aftershocks of its rage. Promethium dripped from its hand, sizzling on the floor. The alcove was a blackened, molten wound. The sin was gone. The vox scream softened just for a moment into a long, shuddering, ecstatic cry of release. Magos 8 Klin observed the molten, smoking ruin. His optics were unblinking. The dawn broke like a fresh wound over the horizon of Lyra Prime. It was not a sunrise. It was a filtration of sickly, greenish-yellow light through the planet's permanent, toxin-choked smoke shroud. The light revealed the front line, a kilometer-wide river of churned mud razor wire, and the splintered bones of the Manufactorum district. And there, waiting in the forward trench, a trench so vast it was more of a canyon, stood the damned. The penitent, the Divina Dolorum, was not alone. It was one of a line. A dozen penitent engines, chained and silent, stood shoulder to shoulder in the pre-dawn gloom, their colossal hunched forms like a row of gargoyles waiting to take flight. They were the first wave, the shock troops of the soul. Inside her iron mask, the penitent was in a state of agonizing, suspended animation. After the test, 8 Klin had reduced the chemical flow to a dormant state, just enough to keep her consciousness fused with the machine spirit, but not enough to allow action. It was a new kind of hell. It was the rage of the machine and the guilt of the woman, both straining against a chemical leash. She was a hurricane trapped in a bottle. Her reactor hummed, her vox emitted a low, distorted, bubbling, keen the sound of her constant electronically filtered weeping. Her limbs, the great arms of steel, were locked. Her legs were bolted to heavy iron anchors embedded in the trench floor. She was a weapon on safe. The mud of the trench floor was a slurry of unidentifiable filth, but rising above it came the sound of iron-shod boots and the chanting of holy scripture. A procession moved along the line of chained machines. At its head was Confessor Malachi, his throne chair carried by lumbering servitors. He was here to sanctify the sacrifice. He stopped before the first machine in the line. "O engine of our faith, O vessel of our guilt." His synthesized voice boomed, cutting through the distant rumble of artillery. "Thou art the sin made manifest. Thou art the judgment made steel." Acolytes followed him, swinging thuribles that billowed clouds of incense, thick and cloying, barely masking the smell of promethium and death. One of them, a trembling novice, stepped forward with a bucket of blessed oils daubing the holy aquila on the machine's leg. Malachi laid a skeletal bionic hand on the cold adamantium. "Spirit of the machine, accept the offering of this unworthy. May her agony be your strength. May her death be your glory." He then moved to the next machine, and the next, repeating the litany. He arrived at the Divina Dolorum. The penitent, trapped within her sensory prison, felt the confessor's presence. His electromagnetic field was a spike of cold, hard authority in her perception. Component 774, Malachi's voice was a whisper projected only to her. He knew she could hear. "Arabelle, the sin of compassion. Today you will burn that sin from the world. You will show the heretic the true face of the Emperor's mercy. You will show them oblivion." He placed his hand on her chest directly over the spot where her organic body was entombed. Through the hull, through the restraints, she felt the pressure of his touch like a brand of ice. "You begged for the fire," he rasped. "Today you shall receive it." He made the sign of the Aquila not on her but on the machine. He ignored the constant bubbling, amplified shriek of the woman inside. He ignored the spasms of the small, pale, organic hands, visible through the framework, clenching and unclenching in chemical torment. That was just the bio-component functioning. His blessing was for the weapon. "Hallowed be thy sores, which are his teeth," he chanted. "Hallowed be thy flames, which are his breath. In his name." Purge. Malachi moved to the center of the line and raised his Crozius. He turned to face the enemy lines, a dark, churning mass of crimson and brass, the warband of the word-bearers dug in half a mile away. A single pure trumpet note cut the air. "The signal!" Tech priests Malachi roared. "Unleash the choir Magos 8 Klin," stationed at a data lectern in the command trench behind them, made a single precise gesture. All along the line, the sound of explosive bolts. Thwack! 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 The iron anchors holding the penitent's feet were blown free. Simultaneously, the injectors in her heart fired. The dormant state was over. The flame of righteous hate and the tears of the Emperor flooded her system. The hurricane was released from the bottle. The dormant keen exploded into the full-throated, deafening metallic scream of the Voxcaster. The reactor roared to full, terrifying life. The rage of the machine spirit, the agony of the chemicals, and the focused, programmed hatred of the penitent all slammed into her consciousness as one. She was free. She was unleashed. She was aimed. Her head, the sensor pod of the machine, snapped up. Across the mud she saw them. The targets. The red-armored heretics. The sinners. She saw the face of the child. She saw the face of the word-bearer. They were the same face. And in her mind a single, thunderous ecstatic. The imperial war horn sounded. It was not a note. It was a tear in the sky, a command of brass, pure and absolute. For the penitent, it was the starting gun. It was permission. The chemical system which had held it taut as a bowstring now detonated. A final massive bolus, a tidal wave of pure rage and combat stims, was dumped directly into Arabelle's frantic, captive heart. The rage, the pain, the guilt. They fused into one, a singular motive force forward. SCHRAAANK. There was no smooth acceleration. It was a jerk, a violent, brutal lurch. The penitent, along with its 11 sister machines, heaved itself up and out of the trench in a synchronized seismic crash of metal and mud. They did not run. They rampagged. Their multi-ton footsteps hammered the earth, shaking the no-man's land, each step a ground-shattering impact, a rhythm of destruction. The speed was impossible. A 30-ton thing should not move this fast. It was an avalanche, an uncontrollable stampede, a race towards oblivion. And then the storm hit. The storm of sensation. The world outside its iron mask was a chaotic hell. It did not see. It perceived. The enemy opened fire. First the lasguns, thousands of useless beams of light. They splashed against its adamantium hull, and the penitent felt every single one. They were not impacts. They were stings, white-hot needles pricking its metal skin, each one an insult, a reminder that the filthy heretic dared to touch it. Tink, 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 tink. The insult fed its rage. The scream from its voxcasters, its own hysterical hymn, climbed an octave, a shriek of metal and pure, undiluted hate. Scream! The roar of the reactor furnace at its back was not a sound. It was a vibration. It felt it in its bones, in its pistons, and actuators, a roaring, white-hot kinetic power driving it forward. Then the heavy bolters. Slam! An explosive shell struck its left shoulder pauldron. Pain. A white-hot blinding nova of agony exploded from the impact point. It raced down the artificial nerve links and slammed directly into Arabelle's captive brain. It surpassed anything Salome's whip could have inflicted. It was pure, unfiltered neural shock. But the system was programmed for this. The chemicals did their work. The pain was not interpreted as damage. It was interpreted as outrage. How dare they heretic sin? Its fury doubled. It charged faster. The impact did not slow it. It propelled it. It was steering the machine, but there were no levers, no buttons, no conscious thought. 500 meters away, an enemy mortar pit dug into the ruins of a hab block opened fire. The Penitent saw it. Not with its optics. It saw it with hatred. In its mind, inside its iron mask, the flickering, programmed image of sin was instantly assigned to that location. There. It is there. The sin. The insult. My failure. It focused. It focused everything, its rage, its guilt, the fire searing its body, the primal hatred of the machine spirit into a single, white-hot point of concentration. It willed that mortar pit to die. And the machine obeyed. It did not steer. It desired. It hated. And that hatred was a command. The pistons in its legs adjusted a microsecond shift in weight and pressure. The colossal machine altered its path, veering almost imperceptibly, crashing straight through the burning hulk of a Lehman Russ, aiming directly for the target of its hatred. It was an arrow. A 30-foot screaming, two-legged arrow loosed from the bow of judgment. And it was bearing down on its target at an impossible, unstoppable speed. The collision was coming. The Penitent did not stop. It did not slow. It did not hit the mortar pit. It erased it. It crashed through the sandbag wall as if it were paper, its multi-ton weight pulverizing plasteel concrete and the soft, weak flesh of the heretics within. The word-bearers, their faces etched with the 8-pointed star, turned from defiance to sheer infantile terror in the microsecond before the impact. The collision was a jarring, glorious thud that the Penitent felt in its very reactor. Sin touched. Sin. It raised its right hand. The buzzsaws already spinning screamed to life. Wah! Scream! It was not a cut. It was an excavation. The Penitent slammed the spinning adamantium teeth into the nearest traitor, a hulking brute in crimson armor. It felt the feedback. It felt the resistance. It felt the crunch of his power armor hard. It felt the parting of his flesh soft. It felt the grinding of his spine. Yes! The feedback was not pain. It was a jolt of ecstatic electrical release. It was a microsecond of relief from the constant agonizing burn of its own existence. This was absolution. This was forgiveness delivered one screaming, bloody piece at a time. The traitor's body exploded in a red mist. It brought the saws down again. And again. Screech, screech! It dismembered the mortar. It tore the gunner in half. It shredded the very earth on which they had stood, digging furrows of hate into the ground. The sin was mangled, but the stain was not clean. It was not pure. A second squad of heretics recovering from the shock opened fire from a flanking ruin, their bolter shells pinging like angry fists against its chassis. More sin. The Penitent turned its movements impossibly fast for its size. Its vox shriek hit a new, piercing octave of pure, unadulterated fury. It raised its left hand. It willed the world to burn. Whoosh! A 30-meter torrent of jellied, sanctified promethium erupted from its triple barrels. The ruin was engulfed. The heretics who had been standing there became living, screaming torches, their armor melting, their flesh blackening in an instant. The wave of heat washed over the Penitent's own hull. It was not pain. It was warmth. It was the Emperor's embrace, a holy baptism of fire. And the smell, the sharp, greasy, acrid smell of cooking, burning flesh and promethium, was interpreted by her fractured, programmed mind as the purest incense. It was the scent of victory. It was the perfume of righteousness. It was the smell of forgiveness. It bathed the ruin in flame until the screams stopped. And then in the heart of the inferno, the last piece of Arabelle, the tiny witnessing shard that was still her, finally dissolved. There was no more thought. No I must kill or I am sin. There was no more Arabelle. There was no more separate raging machine spirit. There was only the Penitent. It was a singularity of violence, a pure, unthinking, unfeeling instinct for destruction. It was an automaton of holy rage, a puppet whose strings were pulled by chemicals and faith. It was a shark finally tasting blood. It was a storm finally making landfall. It was drunk on the chemical flood in its veins, drunk on the high-voltage feedback of agony, drunk on the symphony of slaughter it was conducting. Its own amplified metallic shriek was the violin section. The whir crunch of its saws was the percussion. The whoosh of its flamers was the brass. And the screams of the dying, the screams of the heretics, they were the choir. It did not pause. It did not reassess. It plunged deeper into the enemy lines, a 30-foot screaming, burning, rending god of death. It was the physical manifestation of its own name. It was the Emperor's judgment made hideously, gloriously real. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable, shrieking avatar of destruction, carving a molten, bloody channel through the word-bearer's defense line. The heretics broke before it. Their bolt of fire was useless, their shouted curses drowned by its constant, deafening hymn of pain. They were sinners, and this was their judgment. But the archenemy does not deal in simple soldiers. From the ruins of a collapsed basilica, a greater sin emerged. It was a defiler, the same pattern of soul-bound demon engine that had once guarded the Vexillum. Its crab-like metallic legs tore through rubble, and its battle cannon swiveled, acquiring a target. It saw the Divina Dolorem. It saw a rival. It saw an insult to its own dark gods. The Penitent, lost in its red-hot ecstasy of slaughter, did not see the threat. It was too busy pureeing a heavy weapons squad, its saws a blur of crimson. The Defiler fired. The shell was not a bolter round. It was a high-explosive, armor-piercing demon shell. It struck the Penitent high on the left side, at the joint where the heavy flamer arm met the torso. The explosion was cataclysmic. Kurakakum! The sound was not a sound. It was the end of the world. The Penitent was hurled sideways, its 30-foot frame lifted from the ground by the sheer kinetic force. It crashed into the ruin it had just been burning, collapsing the remaining wall. And the pain agonist, the tears of the Emperor, was designed to amplify every signal. The neural link was designed to make the machine's body her body. When the shell hit Arabelle's mind did not register an explosion. It registered an amputation. It was the sensation of her entire left arm being vaporized by a bolt of pure, white-hot, celestial hatred. The agony was not a nova. It was a universe. It was an all-consuming, all-encompassing, infinite fact that deleted every other thought, every other sensation. The rage, the guilt, the chemicals, all were incinerated by this one impossible, agonizing moment. The feedback was instantaneous. Her organic body, crucified within the machine's chest, arched so violently against its restraints that her bones snapped. The scream that tore from her throat, amplified by the voxcasters, was no longer a shriek of rage. It was a single, pure, glass-shattering note of agony. And then the system reacted. A normal machine would shut down. A normal pilot would die of neural shock. But the Penitent engine is not a normal machine, and its pilot is not a normal pilot. The system registered the catastrophic damage. It registered the pilot's life signs flatlining from the shock. It registered a failure. And failure is sin. Critical damage. Biocomponent. Failure imminent. Protocol ultima dolorem. The correctional stimulus was for disobedience. This was for extinction. The injectors fired again. But this time it was not just the pain agonist. This time it was everything. The last reserved ampules of frenzen and slaught, the entire remaining reservoir of chemical rage inducers, and most terrifying of all, a massive jolt of pure, undiluted adrenal stimulant injected directly into her heart, a chemical defibrillator of pure divine madness. It was the Emperor's mercy, a final cocktail designed to grant the penitent one last glorious suicidal blaze of purpose. The effect was instantaneous. Arabelle's heart, which had stopped, exploded back to life. The infinite pain did not stop. It was joined. It was joined by an infinite rage and an infinite chemical ecstasy. The pain was no longer a torment. The pain was no longer data. The pain was the Emperor. In that blinding, impossible microsecond, her shattered, programmed, tortured mind made the final glorious, insane connection. This agonizing, world-ending fire was not a shell. It was not the enemy. It was him. It was the God Emperor of mankind reaching across the veil, plunging his divine golden hand into her chest and touching her soul. He had heard her. He was here. He was purging her. She was not dying. She was ascending. The penitent rose from the rubble. It was a broken thing. Its entire left side was a mangled, molten ruin. The flamer arm was gone, a weeping stump of torn cables and hydraulic fluid. Sparks and fire poured from its wounded torso. But it was alive. It was more than alive. It was divine. The Voxcaster, miraculously undamaged, crackled. The sound that came from it was no longer a scream. It was a laugh, a high-pitched sobbing, utterly ecstatic cackle of pure religious joy. He is here, he touches me. I am forgiven, I am forgiven. The voice was a hybrid, the metallic rasp of the machine spirit, and the broken, weeping voice of Arabelle fused into one. The penitent stood to its full broken height, raised its one remaining arm, the buzzsaws, to the toxic sky, and laughed. It was a sound more terrifying than any scream. It was the sound of a soul that had found its God in the depths of hell. The penitent was broken. But Arabelle, in her own terrible way, was finally saved. And now she had one last glorious thing to do. The world was a blur of white fire and golden light. The penitent's senses were gone, burned away by the shell's impact and the final divine cocktail of chemicals. Its sensor optics were cracked, feeding it a fractured, static-laced image of the battlefield. It no longer felt the insult of lasfire. It no longer heard the roar of the battle. It existed in a private universe of pure, agonizing religious ecstasy. He touches me. He sees me. I am his. And through the smoke, through the static, through the blinding internal light of its own revelation, it saw him. No, not him. It saw the sin, the instrument, the defiler, the demon engine. Its crab-like legs clambering over the rubble was reloading its battle cannon. It was the thing that had delivered the Emperor's touch. It was the holy messenger. The penitent's fractured, insane logic made a new, final connection. That thing. That was the gate. It was the last sin. It was the final, stubborn stain of heretic flesh that stood between the penitent and its final perfect union with the Emperor. The images in her mask, now cracked and flickering, obeyed. Thud. The face of the defiler. Thud. The face of the vexillum. Thud. The face of the child. Sin. 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 The final sin. It was all one. The machine that had judged her was the same machine that had damned her. The choice on Lyra Prime and the shell that struck her were the same event, an alpha and an omega of her failure. And her programming, the deep core-level imperative, screamed its final glorious command. It was not a data packet from 8 Clin. It was a roar from the heart of her new divine consciousness. Chuoktoi redemption. The penitent did not just move. It erupted. It pushed off the rubble with a scream of tearing metal, its one good leg piston firing with suicidal force. It was no longer a charge. It was a lunge, a broken, lopsided, stumbling, unstoppable leap of faith. The reactor cracked, and leaking roared as it was pushed past every safety limit, a volcano of white-hot power. The Defiler turned its cannon, rising. It was too late. The Penitent was upon it. It did not try to fight the demon engine. It did not use skill. It embraced it. With a final ground-shaking crash of metal on metal, the Penitent slammed its own 30-foot broken body into the chassis of the Defiler. The impact was catastrophic. Both machines buckled their armor, screaming. The Defiler Heavier tried to push it back to bring its power claws to bear. But the Penitent had one last gift to give. Its remaining right arm, the buzzsaw, whirred to life. But it did not strike. It did not slash. It clamped. The Penitent drove the massive spinning saws deep into the Defiler's torso, not to cut, but to anchor. The adamantium teeth bit deep, welding the two machines together in a horrific, grinding embrace of death. They were locked, chest to chest, sin to sinner. The Penitent looked up, its cracked, bleeding sensor optic staring directly into the multi-lensed eye of the demon engine. Inside her mask, Arabelle, the long-dead, long-forgotten woman, was smiling. Her ecstatic, laughing shriek filled the Vox. "I have you, I see you, you are the sin, and I am the forgiveness." She was locked. She was ready. The final absolution was at hand. The Defiler roared a sound of demonic electronic rage. It thrashed its power claws, tearing at the Penitent's back, ripping away huge, smoking chunks of adamantium. It was irrelevant. The pain was irrelevant. The damage was irrelevant. The Penitent held on its buzzsaws, locked deep in the Defiler's heart, grinding and chewing, holding the two engines in a lover's fatal embrace. Inside the cockpit, inside the iron mask, Arabelle's physical body was a ruin. Her bones were shattered. Her blood was a boiling chemical sludge. But her mind? Her mind was perfectly, divinely clear. She had her purpose. She had her enemy. She had her salvation. I am the hymn. I am the flame. I am the end. With the last infinitesimal flicker of her original self, a thought not of rage, but of will was formed. A final conscious act of obedience and sacrifice. It was not a command from 8 Klin. It was not a programmed impulse. It was her choice, her first true choice and her last, to give everything. Give. Her mind now, one with the machine, reached deep into its own wounded heart. It found the core. The roaring promethium-fed reactor now cracked and pulsing with unstable white-hot energy. And it found the secondary reservoirs, the emergency promethium tanks for the now vaporized flamer arm. Full, untouched, let it be one. Let the fire within meet the fire without. Emperor, she whispered, her voice a wet, bloody gurgle inside the mask, a sound lost beneath the ecstatic, laughing shriek of the Vox. I... Clean. She willed it. Overload. She willed it. Detonate. She forced the reactor's containment field to collapse. She commanded the emergency release on the promethium tanks to open. It took less than a microsecond. The two forces met. Unstable white-hot plasma from the reactor core and 30 tons of pressurized, gelid liquid fire. There was no bang. Not at first. There was only light. A new sun was born on the battlefield. A blinding, silent, perfect sphere of white-hot, cleansing fire erupted from the center of the two locked machines. It vaporized the Penitent. It vaporized the Defiler. It vaporized the heretics, the ruins, and the very mud in a 50-meter radius. The sound followed a half-second later. A thoom that was not a sound, but a physical fist of concussion that flattened everything for 100 meters more. And for Arabelle, for Component 774, for the Penitent. In the instant before the explosion, in the moment, she gave the final command. The neural link across her connection to everything went quiet. The pain agonist feed stopped. The rage chemical injectors stopped. The frantic flashing images in her mask stopped. The roaring, hateful static of the machine spirit stopped. The feedback from her own screaming voxcaster stopped. The agony of her broken, crucified body stopped. There was a single perfect, infinitesimal moment of pure, absolute silence. A void of sensation. No pain, no rage, no guilt, no machine. She was not Arabelle. She was not the Penitent. She was nothing. And it was done. The connection went static. The line went dead. The pain was over. Her penance was complete. The smoke, a greasy black pillar of incinerated promethium demon ichor and atomized steel, climbed for a long time. It was the only monument. It rose high into the toxic, piss-yellow atmosphere of Lyra Prime, where the uncaring high-altitude winds finally tore it to shreds, blending its dark ash with the permanent, sickly shroud of the world. It was a period, an exclamation point, and then it was nothing. Down below, the battle had already moved on. The hole that the Penitent had torn, the final suicidal thermonuclear gap it had created, was a vacuum. And the Imperium abhors a vacuum. Canoness Lyra, her face a mask of cold fury, had led the countercharge herself. Celestian's battle sisters and the grim chanting zealots of the Frateris militia had poured through the breach, their bolters and flamers cleansing the stunned, reeling word-bearers. The front line had advanced. The enemy was broken. The sector was secured. The war for Lyra Prime would continue for another 6 brutal months. This was not the decisive final battle. This was not the end. It was in the cold, brutal calculus of the Adeptus Ministorum, a single successful tactical expenditure. A problem had been identified. A resource had been allocated. The resource had been consumed. The problem was solved. Next, hours later, long after the din of bolter fire had receded to a distant rhythmic thump, thump, thump in the next district, a new figure picked its way across the battlefield. The ground was a hellscape of smoking craters, liquefied mud, and the grotesque, twisted wreckage of war. Magos Technicus 8 Clin's spider-like metallic limbs clicked with precise, unhurried purpose. He was not a warrior. He was a sanctioned salvager. His 7 green optics, impervious to the heat and the stench of roasted flesh, scanned the epicenter of the blast. The crater was a massive, glassy bowl of blackened, fused earth. There was almost nothing left. The defiler was slag. The Divina Dolorum was atoms. The explosion he noted on his data slate had exceeded farm design parameters. Commendable output. A whirring servo skull, its weak auspex tuned to sanctified alloys, dipped and chirped. Aitklin moved toward the sound. He had found a piece. It had been thrown almost 50 meters, a jagged, man-sized fragment of the Penitent engine's central chassis. The throne. And fused to it like a grotesque, mummified parasite was a blackened, carbonized thing. A shape barely recognizable of a human torso, flash-cooked and welded to the iron by the sheer unholy heat. 8 Clin's mechadendrites whirred, extending fine silver probes. He took a reading from the charred mass. He made a dry, clicking sound, a binary approximation of approval. Then a new mechadendrite. This one, tipped with a fine, high-frequency saw, buzzed to life. With the detached precision of a butcher, it cut the charred, organic lump away from the precious metal. The thing that had been Arabelle, her carbonized, agonizing final form, fell from the iron throne and shattered into a puff of black, greasy dust on the glassy ground. It was an expired component. It was waste. Aitklin ignored it. His optics and probes were focused on the metal. The spinal linkage, 82% structural integrity, his static voice recorded. The primary MIU port, it is salvageable. This was a triumph. The machine spirit, the Divina Dolorum, was not truly dead. Its core personality, its rage, was imprinted on this fragment. It was a seed. Servitor Team 4, he broadcast. Commence reclamation of Holy Relic 88 Alpha. The machine spirit requires a new vessel. The Omnissiah provides. He turned his metal legs, clicking away, his mind already processing the schematics for the Divina Dolorem pattern 2. The biocomponents integration protocol had been a spectacular success. The data from its agony, its performance, its final catastrophic output was invaluable. The next pilot would be even more efficient. Weeks later, in the cold, reclaimed and reconsecrated sanctuary of the convent fortress Canoness, Lyra sat at a high Gothic desk. The sounds of war were distant, a dull headache on the horizon. Before her she had 2 great vellum-bound ledgers. The first was the Liber Despectus, the Book of the Shamed. She opened it, its pages heavy with the names of the fallen and the failed. Her gauntleted finger traced down the list until she found it. The entry written in stark, accusing black ink, Arabelle. Order of our martyred lady, heresy of compassion. She picked up a stylus dipped in blood-red ink. With a single sharp, decisive stroke, she drew a line through the name. A line of expungement, a line of payment. She closed the book. She opened the second. This one was bound in immaculate white, its pages illuminated with gold leaf. It was the Sanctorum Pro Morte, the Book of the Honored Dead, the Roll of Martyrs. She dipped her pen in fresh, bright red ink. Her calligraphy was precise, elegant, and cold as the void. She wrote a new entry. Sister Arabelle. She paused for a second, the title, Sister, feeling strange on her thoughts. Then she continued. Martyred upon the fields of Lyra Prime in the service of his divine will. By her agony she was made pure. By her sacrifice she is redeemed. She closed the book. The ledger was balanced. The accounts were settled. Arabelle's sin had been officially, administratively, and spiritually erased. Her compassion was forgotten. Her glorious, violent death was all that remained. All was as it should be. For the Imperium of man is a vast and infinitely practical machine. It wastes nothing. It does not forgive failure. It refines it. It takes the dross of humanity, its cowards, its heretics, its doubters, its compassionate, and it finds a purpose for them. It renders them down. It turns a psyker's soul into fuel. It turns a criminal's body into a servitor. It turns a battle sister's profound, irredeemable guilt into a weapon. Arabelle's suffering was not a tragedy. It was a resource. Her agony was not a punishment. It was a process. Her soul, whether it was clean or simply annihilated by the force of the explosion, was an irrelevant theological question. Her body and mind had been successfully consumed by the war effort. And the machine is eternal. The machine is always hungry. In the deep, cold dungeons beneath the rebuilt convent in the scriptorum, the iron bells are ringing. Mistress Salome, her face a mask of serene, pious cruelty, walks a new line of shorn-headed kneeling women. She stops before the newest arrival, a young sister from the Order of the Valorous Heart. Her eyes hollow, her knuckles raw from beating the stone floor. Her sin, she had hesitated in executing a group of civilian refugees, believing them to be uncorrupted, a fatal, foolish error, a sin of compassion. Your guilt is profound, child, Salome whispers, her voice a chilling, honeyed venom. A simple eviscerator is not enough to cleanse such a deep stain. The young sister looks up, her eyes no longer filled with fear, but with the cold, hollow yearning for an end. The same yearning Arabelle had. But the Emperor is merciful, Salome continues, a shadow of a smile playing on her lips. He has granted you a special blessing, an honor. Confessor Malachi himself has approved it. She gestures to the shadows at the end of the hall, where a tall, red-robed, multi-limbed figure, Magos 8 Klin, waits patiently, his 7 green optics glowing in the dark. You have been granted the throne of agony. The Divina Dolorem has been rebuilt stronger, purer, and it requires a new, warm heart. The young sister doesn't understand the words, not fully, but she understands the promise of fire, the promise of an end to the guilt. She begins to weep tears of hopeless, ecstatic, terrible relief. The cycle begins anew. The hymn of steel and sin is eternal, and it must always be sung.